The crimson moons of Vaelthera cast their bloody light across the crystal spires of the royal city, where Princess Zurathek stood at the edge of her balcony, her midnight blue fur rippling in the night wind. Her elongated snout twitched as she caught an unfamiliar scent on the air, something that made her predatory instincts both recoil and stir with curiosity. Below in the palace courtyard, her father's guards dragged a strange creature in metal coverings toward the execution grounds. The creature walked upright like her people, but its form was wrong. Too small, too soft, with pale pink skin showing through tears in its artificial hide. No fur, no proper claws, no elongated muzzle filled with razor teeth. It should have been pathetic, yet something in the way it held its head high despite the chains around its wrists made her ears perk forward with interest. Another trespasser from beyond the void, her sister Kythera snarled from behind her, joining Zara on the balcony. Father grows tired of these weak-blooded outsiders, thinking they can violate our territory. The pack laws are clear. Death to all who are not of the blood. Zara's golden eyes never left the strange being. What species is it? The scouts called it human. Apparently, their vessels have been detected at the edge of our system for months. This one ship crashed in the northern forests 3 days ago. The hunting parties found it trying to repair some kind of communication device. The human stumbled as a guard electro-prod jabbed between its shoulder blades, but it did not cry out. Instead, it turned its head upward, scanning the palace towers with eyes that held no trace of submission. When its gaze found hers across the distance, Zara felt something she had never experienced, a jolt of connection that made her breath catch. Those eyes were brown, warm, and deep like the sacred pools in the temple caves. But more than their color, it was the intelligence behind them that struck her. This was not the mindless terror of prey. This was a thinking being, one that assessed and calculated even as death approached. "Take me to the dungeons," Zara said suddenly. Kythera's ears flattened against her skull. "Sister, you cannot be serious. Father's orders are to execute outsiders who threaten our territory. But first, we must determine if they actually pose a threat." Zara turned from the balcony, her ceremonial robes swishing around her powerful frame. A dead enemy tells us nothing. A living one might reveal the intentions of its kind. The dungeon levels beneath the royal palace were carved from the same crystal formations that made up the mountain itself, their walls pulsing with a faint bioluminescent glow. The air hung thick with the scent of previous occupants, fear, pain, and the metallic tang of spilled blood. Zara's claws clicked against the stone as she descended the spiraling staircase, 2 royal guards flanking her. The human had been placed in the deepest cell, behind bars of tempered crystal that could withstand the claws and fangs of even the most desperate prisoner. It sat with its back against the far wall, those strange brown eyes tracking her approach. Up close, she could see the damage from its crash and capture, cuts along its arms, a bruise darkening one side of its face, torn fabric revealing more of that peculiar hairless skin. "You understand our language?" she asked in the common tongue used throughout their star system. The human's head tilted slightly. "Some. Your people taught me when they questioned me." Its voice was different from any she had heard, lower in pitch than her people's typical snarls and growls with an odd musical quality. The words came slowly, as if it was translating them in its mind before speaking. "What is your name, outsider?" "Marcus Chun. Was an explorer from the Terran Federation." "Marcus Chun," she repeated, testing the foreign sounds on her tongue. "I am Princess Zurathek, heir to the crystal throne of Vaelthera. You stand accused of violating our territorial boundaries and threatening our pack security." Marcus shifted forward, leaning against the crystal bars. "I mean no threat to your people. My ships suffer a malfunction during a routine mapping mission. I only entered your system seeking help." "Help!" The word came out as a half-snarl. "Outsiders do not seek help from the Vaeltheri. Outsiders seek to conquer, to steal, to corrupt our bloodlines with their weakness." "Your bloodlines?" Marcus's brow furrowed in confusion. I don't understand. Zara studied him carefully. Either this human was an exceptional liar, or it truly did not comprehend the danger it represented. For 10,000 years, my people have followed the pack laws. We are predators, Marcus Chun. We are hunters, warriors, defenders of our territory. We mate only within our species, we trust only our own blood, and we destroy anything that threatens our purity. But I'm not threatening. Your very existence threatens us. She moved closer to the bars, her imposing 7-foot frame casting shadows across his smaller form. You are weak. You have no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons. Your body is soft, vulnerable. Yet you travel between stars, built machines I cannot comprehend. And when my people captured you, you showed no fear. That combination of weakness and capability, it confuses us. Confusion leads to curiosity. Curiosity leads to contamination. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. And contamination leads to death? The pack laws demanded. But you're here. His voice was quiet, but certain. The princess of her people is in a dungeon cell, speaking with condemned prey. That suggests the laws aren't as absolute as they appear. Zara's ears flicked back, a sign of uncertainty that she immediately regretted showing. I am gathering intelligence about your species before your execution. Nothing more. Intelligence. Marcus leaned back against the wall, and she caught something that might have been a smile crossing his features. What do you want to know? The question caught her off guard. In all her years, no prisoner had offered information so readily. They begged, they bargained, they raged, but they did not simply offer to educate their captors. Your technology. How do your people travel between stars? Fusion drives and quantum tunneling. We bend space around our ships to create corridors through higher dimensions. Your worlds. How many do your people control? 17 systems, 43 habitable worlds, approximately 8 billion souls. Your military. What weapons do you possess? Marcus was quiet for longer this time. Why do you think I would tell you that? Because you are about to die. What harm can the truth do now? The truth. Marcus stood, moving to the bars that separated them. At his full height, he was still more than a foot shorter than her, but something in his posture made him seem larger than his frame suggested. The truth is that my people aren't your enemies, princess. We explore, we learn, we trade. We don't conquer. All species conquer. It is the nature of intelligence. Is it? Marcus reached slowly through the bars, his hand extended palm up in what she somehow understood was a gesture of peace. Or is that just what you've been taught? Zara stared at the offer hand. His skin was pale, scarred from his crash, marked with strange patterns of dark hair. No claws tipped his fingers, just blunt nails that could barely scratch crystal dust. Everything about him should have disgusted her predatory instincts. Instead, she found herself stepping closer. You fear me, Marcus said softly. Not physically. I couldn't harm you if I tried. You fear what I represent. I fear nothing. You fear that your pack laws might be wrong. The words hit like a physical blow. Zara's hand moved instinctively to the ceremonial knife at her belt, her lips pulling back to reveal her fangs. The pack laws have protected our people for millennia. They are absolute, sacred enough to kill someone who poses no threat. You pose the greatest threat of all. The admission came out as a whisper. You make us question. Marcus's hand remained extended between them. Questions aren't dangerous, princess. Refusing to ask them is. Footsteps echoed down the dungeon stairway, heavy, measured, accompanied by the clink of ceremonial armor. Zara's father approached, flanked by the High Executioner and 3 pack leaders. She stepped back from the cell, her moment of uncertainty hidden behind a mask of royal composure. Daughter. King Vorthack's voice rumbled like distant thunder. His massive frame filled the corridor, black fur streaked with the silver of age and authority. I trust your interrogation has yielded useful intelligence about this creature's kind? Some, father. It claims to be an explorer from a peaceful federation. Their technology appears advanced, but not necessarily hostile. Claims. The king's golden eyes, so similar to her own, fixed on Marcus with the flat stare of an apex predator evaluating prey. Words are wind, child. Actions reveal truth. This thing violated our borders, ignored our warning beacons, and brought alien contamination to our pure world. My ship malfunctioned, Marcus said, addressing the king directly. I meant no. Vorthax's roar silenced him instantly. The sound echoed off the crystal walls, a primal expression of dominance that made even Zara's instincts urge submission. You will not speak unless given permission, outsider. Your words carry the taint of lies and weakness. The High Executioner stepped forward, his ceremonial blade gleaming in the bioluminescent light. My king, the sacred hour approaches. The moons align for the ritual of purification. Shall I prepare the creature? Zara felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she couldn't identify or understand. Father, perhaps we should consider keeping it alive for further study. If more of its kind comes searching, more of its kind will find only death, Vorthax snarled. Just as this one will. The pack laws are clear, daughter. No outsider pollutes our world with continued breath. Marcus stepped forward to the bars, his brown eyes meeting the king's golden ones without flinching. Your Majesty, I understand your laws, but I ask you to consider. Vorthax's clawed hand shot through the bars faster than thought, seizing Marcus by the throat and slamming him against the crystal wall. The human's feet left the ground as the king's grip tightened, cutting off his air. You ask nothing, the king growled. You are prey. Prey does not negotiate with predators. Zara watched Marcus's face redden as he struggled against her father's grip. But instead of panic, instead of the wild thrashing she expected, the human's hands moved with deliberate precision. He didn't claw at the king's wrist or try to break free. Instead, his fingers found pressure points along Vorthax's forearm, applying force in exactly the right places to trigger an involuntary muscle spasm. The king's grip loosened just enough for Marcus to gasp out words. Princess, your people deserve better than fear. Vorthax released him, stepping back with shock and rage warring across his features. In 10,000 years of pack law, no prisoner had ever successfully resisted the royal grip. The technique Marcus had used was completely foreign, not brute strength but precise knowledge of anatomy and leverage. Impossible, one of the pack leaders whispered. How could it know our weakness points? Because, Marcus said, rubbing his throat but keeping his eyes on Zara, intelligence adapts. Your people aren't the only ones who study their enemies. The king's roar this time was pure fury. Take it to the execution grounds. Now, I want this abomination's head separated from its shoulders before the moons reach zenith. As the guards moved to unlock the cell, Marcus spoke one final time, his voice directed solely at Zara. Princess, when you inherit your father's throne, remember this moment. Remember that there are alternatives to the pack laws. Your people could be explorers instead of executioners, teachers instead of tyrants. The words followed her as she climbed the dungeon stairs, her father's angry muttering about alien contamination and the purity of the bloodlines filling the corridor behind them. But Marcus Chen's voice echoed louder in her mind. Your people deserve better than fear. Standing once again on her balcony, Zara watched the preparations in the courtyard below. The execution block was being prepared, its crystal surface gleaming under the twin moons. Soon, Marcus would kneel there, and the High Executioner's blade would end his strange, impossible existence. The pack laws demanded it. But, for the first time in her life, Princess Zarathek wondered if the pack laws might be wrong. The human had done something no creature had ever managed. He had planted a seed of doubt in the mind of a Veiltheri royal. As the moons climbed toward their zenith, and the moment of execution approached, that seed began to grow, sending roots deep into her certainty and branches reaching toward possibilities she had never imagined. In the distance, the drums began to beat, calling the pack to witness the purification of their world. But in her heart, Zara heard a different rhythm, the sound of questions that demanded answers, of laws that might not be as sacred as she had been taught. The execution hour was approaching, and, with it, a choice that would change not just her life, but the destiny of her entire people. The execution drums thundered across the royal city as thousands of Veiltheri gathered in the great courtyard. Their eyes gleamed with anticipation in the crimson moonlight, fangs bared in expressions of bloodthirsty approval. The pack laws were about to be upheld once again, their ancient traditions reinforced by the spilling of outsider blood. Princess Zarathek stood on the royal viewing platform, her father's imposing presence beside her as King Vorthak raised his ceremonial staff to address the assembled crowd. But her attention was fixed on the figure being dragged toward the execution block, Marcus Chun, the human who had somehow managed to shake the very foundations of her belief system in the span of a single conversation. Behold, the king's voice boomed across the courtyard, amplified by the crystal acoustics of the palace walls, the consequence of violating our sacred boundaries. Let all who witness remember, the pack laws protect us from contamination, from weakness, from the corruption that would destroy our pure bloodlines. The crowd roared its approval, a sound like breaking thunder that made the crystal spires vibrate in harmony. Zara felt the familiar surge of pack unity, the primal satisfaction that came from the elimination of threats to their people. But underneath that ancient instinct, something else stirred, a growing unease that she couldn't suppress. Marcus was forced to his knees before the execution block, his hands bound behind his back with energy shackles that would prevent any attempt at escape. The High Executioner, his ceremonial robes flowing like liquid shadow, raised the blessed blade that had ended countless outsider lives over the centuries. Any final words? Alien? The executioner's voice carried clearly across the silent courtyard. Marcus lifted his head, his brown eyes scanning the crowd before settling on the royal platform. When he spoke, his voice was steady despite his impending death. I forgive you. The simple statement sent a ripple of confusion through the assembled Veiltheri. Forgiveness was not a concept they understood in this context. Prey did not forgive predators. Victims did not absolve their executioners. The very idea was alien, disturbing in its implications. You forgive us? King Vorthak's voice cracked like a whip. You dare to judge your betters, creature? I understand you, Marcus replied, his gaze never wavering from Zara's face. You're afraid. Your laws, your traditions, your entire society is built on the fear that contact with others will somehow diminish you. But isolation doesn't create strength, it creates stagnation. The crowd's murmur grew angry, threatening. Several pack leaders called for immediate execution, their voices harsh with outrage at the human's audacity. But Zara found herself leaning forward, desperate to hear more of these impossible words. Silence the abomination, Vorthak commanded, but Marcus continued speaking as if he hadn't heard. Princess Zarathek, you asked me about my people's military capabilities. The truth is, we could have conquered your world 1,000 times over. Our ships could turn your moons to dust. Our weapons could crack your planet's core. But we choose not to use that power because true strength lies in protection, not destruction. The High Executioner moved to strike, but something in Zara's expression made him pause. She was staring at Marcus with an intensity that bordered on desperation, as if his words were the key to a lock she hadn't even known existed in her mind. Ow, she called out, her voice cutting through the crowd's growing agitation. How can strength exist without domination? Daughter, the king warned, but Zara ignored him. Marcus smiled then, an expression of warmth and sadness that somehow made him appear more alien than any physical difference could. Because true strength comes from choosing mercy when you could choose violence, from building bridges instead of walls, from protecting what you love without destroying what you don't understand. Enough! Vorthak's roar shattered the moment. Execute this poison-tongued deceiver now. The blade began its descent toward Marcus's neck, gleaming silver in the moonlight. Time seemed to slow as Zara watched the weapon fall, her father's commands echoing in her ears, the crowd's bloodthirsty approval washing over her like a tide. This was the moment of truth, the instant when the pack laws would be upheld once more, when the outsider threat would be eliminated, when everything would return to the way it had always been. Instead, Princess Zarathek leaped from the royal platform. Her powerful legs carried her across the courtyard in 3 massive bounds, her ceremonial robes tearing as she transformed from passive observer to active participant. The crowd's roar changed pitch, confusion replacing bloodlust as their princess landed between the executioner and his intended victim. "Stop," she commanded, her hand seizing the executioner's wrist with enough force to halt the blade mere inches from Marcus's throat. The silence that followed was absolute. In 10,000 years of pack law tradition, no member of the royal family had ever interfered with a lawful execution. The very concept was unthinkable, a violation of everything their society held sacred. "Princess," the high executioner whispered, his voice shaking with shock, "you cannot, I can, and I do." Zara's golden eyes blazed with an authority that brooked no argument. "I invoke the right of royal intervention. This prisoner will be spared until further investigation can be completed." The right of royal intervention was an ancient law, older even than the pack laws themselves, dating back to the earliest days of Veiltheri civilization when their ancestors had first established the monarchy. It had been invoked perhaps a dozen times in their entire history, always for matters of supreme importance to the survival of their people. King Vorthak's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade through flesh. "Daughter, you will explain this madness immediately." Zara turned to face her father, still positioned protectively over Marcus's kneeling form. "Father, this human possesses knowledge that could be vital to our people's future. His technology, his understanding of galactic politics, his insights into other species, all of this intelligence will be lost if we execute him now." Intelligence. The king descended from the royal platform, his massive frame radiating fury as he approached. What intelligence could possibly justify violating the pack laws? "He told me that his people could destroy our world, but choose not to," Zara replied, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "If more humans come searching for him, we need to understand their true capabilities and intentions. Killing their representative in ignorance could doom our entire civilization." It was a clever argument, framing her intervention in terms of protecting their people rather than challenging their fundamental beliefs. But Zara knew that her father wasn't fooled. The king had ruled for over a century, and his political instincts were as sharp as his claws. "You speak of intelligence," Vorthak said, coming to a stop just outside striking distance of his daughter. "But your actions suggest contamination. This creature has poisoned your thoughts with its alien words." The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence. Contamination was the gravest charge that could be leveled against a Veiltheri, suggesting that their pure bloodline had been corrupted by exposure to outsider influence. If proven, it carried only one penalty: exile or death. "My thoughts remain pure," Zara replied, but she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. Was she contaminated? Had Marcus somehow altered her fundamental nature with his strange philosophy of strength through mercy? "I seek only to protect our people from threats we don't yet understand." "Then you will prove your purity," the king declared, his words carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The trial of clarity will determine whether you remain fit to inherit the throne or whether you have indeed been corrupted beyond redemption." Gasps echoed across the courtyard. The trial of clarity was a ritual almost as ancient as the pack laws themselves, designed to test a Veiltheri's commitment to their species' fundamental values. No member of the royal family had been subjected to such a trial in over 3,000 years. "Father, surely," Zara began, but Vorthak silenced her with a gesture. "The trial will commence at dawn. Until then, both you and the creature will remain under guard." If you have truly acted to protect our people, the sacred fires will reveal your purity. If you have been contaminated, he left the sentence unfinished, but everyone present understood the implications. As royal guards moved to escort both Marcus and Zara from the execution grounds, the human spoke quietly, his words meant for her ears alone. You didn't have to do that. You've risked everything to save someone you barely know. I didn't save you, Zara replied, her voice equally low as they were marched toward the palace. I simply delayed your execution until after my trial. If I fail the test of clarity, we'll both die together. Why? Marcus asked. Why risk your life, your throne, your entire future for a stranger? Zara was quiet for a long moment, considering the question as they walked through corridors lined with tapestries depicting 10,000 years of Veiltheri history. Countless battles, conquests, and executions, all justified by the pack law she had just openly defied. Because, she finally whispered, you made me realize that our strength might actually be weakness. Our purity might be stagnation. Our laws might be chains that bind us to a future no better than our past. And if your people reject that possibility, then we'll die as we lived alone. The remainder of the night passed in a blur of preparation and contemplation. Marcus was returned to his cell, but now it was guarded by twice as many soldiers, their eyes watchful for any sign of the contamination that their princess might have contracted. Zara herself was confined to her chambers, attended by servants whose loyalty to the crown was absolute, but whose expressions revealed deep concern for her apparent madness. As dawn approached, the princess stood once again on her balcony, watching the twin moons set behind the crystal mountains. Soon, the sacred fires would test her commitment to the pack laws, and she would either prove her purity or die for her perceived corruption. But as she gazed out over her kingdom, Zara found herself thinking not of death or disgrace, but of possibility. Marcus had spoken of alternatives to their ancient ways, of strength without domination, of protection without destruction, of a future where her people might explore the stars instead of cowering from them. In the dungeons below, she knew that the human was probably preparing for death, accepting his fate with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout his captivity. He had no reason to hope for rescue, no expectation of mercy from species that had never shown it to outsiders. Yet he had forgiven them. That single act of grace, so alien to Veiltheri thinking, had planted seeds of change that were already beginning to grow. Whether those seeds would bloom into a new future for her people or be burned away in the sacred fires of tradition remained to be seen. The drums began to sound again as the sun rose over the crystal peaks, calling the pack to witness another ancient ritual. But this time, it would not be an outsider on trial. It would be the very future of their civilization, tested in the flames of their most sacred laws. Princess Zarathek straightened her shoulders and prepared to face the trial of clarity, knowing that her choices in the next few hours would determine not just her own fate, but the destiny of every Veiltheri who would come after her. The pack laws demanded absolute purity, absolute obedience, absolute isolation from the contamination of outsider influence. But perhaps, she thought as she walked toward her trial, it was time for new laws. The Temple of Sacred Flames had stood at the heart of Veiltheri's capital for over 8,000 years, its crystalline walls carved with the names of every Veiltheri who had faced the trial of clarity and emerged purified. As dawn broke over the crystal peaks, Princess Zarathek walked the ancient corridors toward the chamber where her loyalty to the pack laws would be tested in fire and pain. The trial chamber itself was a masterwork of Veiltheri engineering and faith, a circular room with walls of translucent crystal that focused the morning sunlight into intense beams of cleansing flame. At the center stood the sacred brazier, its flames fed by gases that emerged from deep within their planet's core, burning with colors that existed nowhere else in the known galaxy. King Vorthak waited beside the brazier, his ceremonial robes marking him not as her father, but as the supreme judge of their people's purity. Around the chamber's perimeter stood the circle of elders, 12 ancient Veiltheri, whose combined wisdom was said to equal that of the pack laws themselves. Their eyes held no warmth as they watched Zara approach, only the cold assessment of potential corruption. Princess Zarathek, Elder Mithera, spoke first, her voice creaking with age but still carrying absolute authority. You stand accused of contamination by outsider influence. You have defied the pack laws, interfered with a lawful execution, and spoken words that suggest sympathy for our enemies. How do you answer these charges? Zara knelt before the sacred brazier, feeling the heat of the flames against her face. The traditional response was a declaration of innocence, a claim that her actions had been misunderstood or misrepresented. Instead, she found herself speaking words that no royal had ever uttered in this sacred place. I answer that the pack laws may be wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. Several elders stepped back as if her words were physically dangerous, while others bared their fangs in expressions of outrage. King Vorthak's golden eyes blazed with a fury that matched the sacred flames. You confess to corruption? Elder Korthek snarled, his ancient voice crackling with indignation. You admit that the outsider's poison has infected your mind? I confess to thinking, Zara replied, rising to face the circle of elders with her head held high. I confess to questioning whether laws created 10,000 years ago still serve our people in a galaxy we barely understand. I confess to wondering if our strength might be better used to explore and protect rather than isolate and execute. Blasphemy, whispered Elder Vetheran, but his voice carried uncertainty rather than conviction. The pack laws have protected us since the dawn of our civilization. They are the foundation of our survival, our purity, our power. Are they? Zara turned toward the crystal walls, her reflection multiplied endlessly in their faceted surfaces. We hide behind our laws like frightened children, killing anything we don't understand, cutting ourselves off from a galaxy filled with potential allies and knowledge. Is that strength, or is it cowardice? King Vorthak stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the sacred flames. You will undergo the purification now, daughter. The fires will burn away this contamination, or they will burn away your life. Those are the only options the pack laws allow. The purification was the heart of the trial of clarity, a ritual where the accused would thrust their hands into the sacred flames while reciting the fundamental principles of Veiltheri society. If their conviction was pure, the flames would not burn them. If corruption had taken root in their hearts, the fire would consume their flesh and reveal their unworthiness. But as Zara approached the blazing brazier, she knew that the flames would burn her. Not because Marcus had corrupted her, but because she could no longer claim absolute faith in law she had come to see as outdated and destructive. The trial was designed to detect doubt, and doubt filled every fiber of her being. I have a request, she said, stopping just outside the flame's reach. Before I undergo purification, I ask that the human be brought here to witness my trial. Impossible el de mitarasnaped. No outsider has ever been permitted in the sacred chamber. And no princess has ever been tried for contamination by outsider influence, Zara replied. These are unprecedented circumstances. If I am to die for my association with the creature, should it not witness the consequences of its actions? The elders murmured among themselves, debating the precedent and propriety of such a request. But Zara wasn't really asking for Marcus to witness her trial. She was asking for one last chance to present her case, to speak words that might plant seeds of change even as the sacred flames consumed her body. King Vorthak studied his daughter's face, searching for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. What he saw there was something he had never encountered in all his years of rule: absolute honesty. She was not trying to escape her fate or manipulate the trial. She simply wanted to ensure that her final act served some greater purpose. Bring the creature, he commanded, his voice heavy with resignation. Let it see what becomes of those who allow outsider poison to corrupt their souls. Minutes later, Marcus was escorted into the sacred chamber, his chains clinking softly against the crystal floor. He took in the ritual setting with those impossibly calm brown eyes, understanding immediately what was about to happen. When his gaze met Zara's across the flames, she saw no surprise there, only sadness and what might have been pride. "Princess," he said simply, "you don't have to do this for me. I'm not doing it for you," Zara replied, moving closer to the sacred flames. "I'm doing it for my people, for the future they deserve." She turned to address the assembled elders, her voice carrying clearly through the crystal chamber. "You want me to place my hands in these flames and declare my absolute faith in the pack laws. But I cannot do that because I've seen a better way. Then you will burn," Elder Korthek declared, "and your corruption will die with you." "Perhaps. But before I burn, let me tell you what the human showed me." Zara began to circle the blazing brazier, her words directed at each elder in turn. "He showed me that strength can exist without cruelty, that protection can exist without isolation, that a species can explore the galaxy without losing their identity." "Lies," Elder Vethrin hissed. "The outsider filled your mind with seductive falsehoods designed to weaken our resolve." "Did he?" Zara stopped before her father, meeting the king's burning gaze without flinching. "Father, you've ruled our people for over a century. In all that time, have we grown stronger? Have we learned anything new? Have we built anything beautiful? Or have we simply maintained what our ancestors created?" The question hung in the air like smoke from the sacred flames. King Vorthak's jaw worked silently, his golden eyes reflecting an internal struggle that none of the assembled elders had ever seen in their monarch. "We have survived," he said finally. "We have maintained our purity. Survival without growth is not life." Marcus spoke for the first time since entering the chamber, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the crystal acoustics. "It's just a very slow form of death. Silence contaminates her." Elder Mithera snarled, but her command lacked its earlier conviction. The human's words had found their mark, touching on fears that every Veiltheri secretly harbored, that their great civilization was stagnating, that their isolation was slowly strangling them. Zara sensed the shift in the chamber's atmosphere and pressed her advantage. "The pack laws tell us that purity is strength, but what if they're wrong? What if our greatest strength lies not in what we reject, but in what we're willing to embrace?" She moved toward the sacred flames, extending her hands toward their burning heart. The heat was incredible, a searing intensity that made her fur smoke and her skin redden even from a distance. But she did not retreat. "I choose to undergo purification," she declared, "but not to prove my faith in the pack laws. I undergo it to prove my faith in something greater, the possibility that my people can become more than we have ever been." "Princess, no." Marcus lunged forward, but the guard's weapons stopped him cold. "The flames will kill you." "Perhaps," Zara replied, her golden eyes reflecting the dancing fire. "But sometimes death is the only way to birth something new." She plunged her hands into the sacred flames. The pain was indescribable, not just the physical agony of flesh meeting fire, but the spiritual torment of feeling the pack laws themselves testing her worthiness. The flames probed her mind, searching for absolute conviction, unwavering faith, pure dedication to the ancient ways that had governed her people since time immemorial. What they found was doubt, questions, hope for change, love for possibilities that lay beyond the boundaries of tradition. The flames began to consume her hands, her fur catching fire, her skin blistering and charring. But instead of screaming in agony or pulling away in defeat, Princess Zarathek began to speak. "I renounce the pack laws," she declared, her voice carrying over the sound of her own burning flesh. "Not because I hate my people, but because I love them too much to watch them waste away in isolation. I I renounce the idea that purity requires ignorance, that strength requires cruelty, that survival requires the death of everyone who might teach us something new. The flames climbed higher, spreading up her arms toward her shoulders. Her ceremonial robes began to smolder and catch fire. But her voice never wavered. Her golden eyes never left the faces of the assembled elders. I choose contamination if it means growth. I choose corruption if it means learning. I choose to embrace the unknown rather than cower from it. Elder Mithera stepped forward, her ancient voice shaking with something that might have been awe. Princess, the flames, they should have consumed you completely by now. But you still speak. You still stand. It was true. Though the fire was burning her flesh, though the sacred flames were testing her very soul, something was protecting her from complete destruction. The other elders began to murmur among themselves, their voices filled with confusion and growing wonder. The sacred fire accepts her, Elder Vethrin whispered. But how is that possible? She has denied the pack laws themselves. King Vorthak moved closer to his daughter, studying the phenomenon with eyes that held a mixture of terror and amazement. The flames burn her, but they do not consume her. The trial recognizes her purity of purpose, even though that purpose contradicts everything we believe. Marcus understood first. It's not testing her faith in your laws, he said, his voice filled with quiet amazement. It's testing her faith in her people, and that faith is absolute. Zara's hands were charred and bleeding, her arms burned black to the elbows, but she was alive. More than alive, she was transformed. The sacred flames had accepted her sacrifice while rejecting her beliefs, creating a paradox that challenged every assumption the Veil Theory held about purity and contamination. The trial is complete, she declared, withdrawing her ruined hands from the brazier. I've been tested by sacred fire and found worthy not of upholding the pack laws, but of changing them. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Veil Theory faced a question that their ancient laws could not answer. What happened when the sacred flames themselves declared that change was not corruption? Elder Korthek was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. This is impossible. The trial cannot be wrong. The sacred flames cannot lie. Then, perhaps, Zara said, cradling her burned hands against her chest, it's time we considered the possibility that our understanding has been incomplete. She turned toward Marcus, who was staring at her with an expression of profound respect and something else, something that looked remarkably like the beginnings of love. The human showed me that there are alternatives to our ancient ways, she continued, addressing the assembled elders. He offered friendship where we expected conquest, mercy where we demanded submission, hope where we delivered only death. If that is contamination, then I choose to be contaminated. And if the pack rejects your choice? King Vorthak asked, his voice heavy with the weight of inevitable consequences. Princess Zarathek straightened her shoulders, her burned hands still smoking from the sacred flames, her golden eyes blazing with a new kind of fire. The fire of possibility, of hope, of love that transcended the boundaries of species and tradition. Then, I will make a new pact, she declared. One that values growth over stagnation, exploration over isolation, love over law. The words echoed through the crystal chamber, carrying with them the sound of 10,000 years of tradition beginning to crack. The pack laws had demanded absolute purity, but the sacred flames themselves had declared that impurity might sometimes be the path to salvation. Change was coming to Vaelthera, whether her people were ready for it or not. And at the center of that change stood a princess who had chosen love over law, and a human who had shown her that sometimes the greatest strength lay not in resistance to change, but in embracing it completely. The news of Princess Zarathek's trial spread through the Crystal City like wildfire through dry forest. Within hours, crowds gathered in the great squares, their voices rising in heated debate about what the Sacred Flame's verdict meant for their future. Some called for immediate exile of both the princess and her human contaminator. Others whispered that perhaps the time had come to question laws that had remained unchanged for 10 millennia. In the royal palace, King Vorthak sat alone in his private chambers, staring at reports from his scouts that painted a troubling picture of the galaxy beyond their isolated world. Marcus's claims about human peaceful intentions were proving accurate. Long-range sensors had detected no military buildup, no aggressive positioning, no signs of impending invasion. Instead, the human ships that periodically appeared at the edge of their system seemed content to observe and depart, making no attempt to penetrate Veiltheri defenses. The king realized exactly what Marcus had told him to expect. A soft knock at his door interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he commanded, expecting one of his advisors with more reports about the growing unrest in the capital. Instead, Princess Zurathek stepped through the doorway, her hands wrapped in healing bandages, but her bearing as proud and defiant as ever. Behind her walked Marcus Chun, no longer in chains, but dressed in simple robes provided by the palace staff. The sight of an unbound human walking freely through the royal quarters would have been unthinkable just days ago. "Father," Zara said, approaching the massive desk that dominated the chamber. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to discuss," Vorthak replied, though his voice lacked its usual thunder. "The sacred flames may have spared your life, but they have not changed the fundamental reality of our situation. The pack laws exist for a reason, daughter. Without them, we will lose everything that makes us Veiltheri. Will we?" Zara took a seat across from him, her golden eyes meeting his without flinching. "Or will we finally become what we were meant to be?" Marcus remained standing near the door, his quiet presence somehow filling the vast chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of careful observation and genuine concern. "Your Majesty, may I share something that your long-range sensors might have missed?" The king's ears flattened against his skull. "You presume much, human. I presume nothing. I offer information." Marcus stepped forward slightly, his hands visible and non-threatening. 3 days ago, a Zealothi battle fleet entered this star system. They've been hiding behind your outer moon, studying your defenses, planning an invasion. The words hit like a physical blow. The Zealothi were the Veiltheri's oldest enemies, a species of cybernetically enhanced raiders who had tried to conquer Veilthir twice in the past millennium. If they had returned, and if the Veiltheri intelligence network had failed to detect them, impossible Vorthak snarled. Our sensors would have. Your sensors are excellent at detecting ships using conventional drives, Marcus interrupted gently. But the Zealothi have upgraded their technology. They're using quantum cloaking now, phase-shifting their hulls to avoid detection. "And how would you know this?" the king demanded, his claws extending instinctively. "Because my ship's sensors are designed to detect exactly that kind of cloaking. The Terran Federation has been tracking Zealothi movement patterns for the past 5 years." Marcus moved to the chamber's large window, gesturing toward the star-filled sky beyond. "They're not here for territory, Your Majesty. They're here for slaves." The revelation sent ice through Vorthak's veins. Zealothi slave raids were legendary throughout the galaxy. Entire populations disappearing overnight, their people sold to mining corporations in distant systems. If such a fleet was indeed hidden in their system, why would you tell us this? Zara asked, voicing the question that burned in her father's mind. Your people have no reason to warn us about anything. Marcus turned from the window, his brown eyes serious but warm. Because warning people about danger is what good neighbors do. And, despite what your pack laws say, the Terran Federation would very much like to be your neighbors. King Vorthak studied the human's face, searching for any sign of deception or manipulation. What he found there was the same unsettling honesty that had confused him from the beginning, a complete absence of the predatory calculation he expected from other species. You offer aid against our enemies, the king said slowly. What do you want in return? Nothing, Marcus replied. Though after we deal with the Zealothi, we'd very much like to establish trade relations and cultural exchange programs. Trade. Vorthak repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. Exchange. These concepts are forbidden by the pack laws. Then, perhaps, Zara said softly, it's time to write new laws. Before the king could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the palace. The deep, resonant tones that indicated imminent attack. Through the chamber windows, flashes of weapons fire could be seen in the upper atmosphere as the hidden Zealoty fleet dropped their cloaking and began their assault. It seems the discussion is academic now, Marcus observed calmly. Your Majesty, how long can your defenses hold? Vorthak was already moving toward the command center, his daughter and the human following close behind. Against a full Zealoty battle fleet? Perhaps 6 hours, if we're fortunate. The palace command center was a marvel of veil theory engineering. Crystal interfaces that responded to neural commands, holographic displays that showed every detail of the ongoing battle, tactical computers that calculated odds, and strategies with frightening precision. But as the king took his position at the central command throne, those calculations painted an increasingly grim picture. 17 Zealoty destroyers for heavy cruisers and a slave transport capable of holding 50,000 prisoners, reported General Kithara, the Veil Theory's senior military commander. They've taken out 2 of our orbital defense platforms already. At current rate of engagement, our perimeter will collapse within 4 hours. Options. Vorthak demanded, his fingers dancing across the crystal controls as he absorbed tactical data. We can evacuate the capital and retreat to the mountain fortresses, the general replied. From there, we might hold out for several months before they starve us out and take our people anyway, Zara finished grimly. Father, there has to be another option. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. There is. Your Majesty, if I may. He gestured toward one of the communication consoles. You want to contact your people, Vorthak said. It wasn't a question. A single message to the Terran Federation emergency frequency. Our ships are fast, and we've been tracking this Zealoty fleet longer than you have. Help could arrive within 2 hours. And the price for this aid? Marcus met the king's burning gaze without flinching. The price is allowing your people to survive. Everything else can be negotiated later. The tactical display flickered as another orbital platform died in silent fire. Veil Theory fighters were engaging the enemy with typical courage and ferocity, but they were vastly outnumbered. The mathematics of the battle were brutally clear. Without intervention, the Veil Theory would lose not just their world, but their freedom. King Vorthak looked at his daughter, seeing in her golden eyes a reflection of his own desperate hope. The pack laws had never contemplated this scenario, accepting aid from outsiders in order to survive. But then, the pack laws had never contemplated a lot of things that suddenly seemed vital to their people's future. Send your message, human, he said finally. But know that if this is treachery, it's not, Marcus replied simply, moving to the communication console with practiced efficiency. And your Majesty? My name is Marcus Chun. I prefer if you used it. The message was brief, transmitted on frequencies that no Veil Theory equipment could access. Within minutes, a response came back, acknowledgement and coordinates for a joint defensive action. The Terran Federation ships would arrive in 97 minutes. Now what? General Kithara asked, her voice tight with the strain of coordinating a desperate defense. Now we hold, Zara said, moving to her own tactical station. We fight as we've always fought, but this time we fight alongside allies instead of alone. The next hour and a half passed in a blur of desperate combat. Veil Theory fighters darted through space like silver darts, their pilots' natural aggression and skill taking a heavy toll on the larger Zealoty ships. But for every enemy vessel damaged, 2 more seemed to take its place. The orbital defense grid crumbled under sustained bombardment, and enemy landing parties began preparing to assault the planet's surface. Then, at the edge of the system, space itself seemed to ripple and tear. The Terran Federation relief fleet emerged from their quantum tunnels like angels of salvation. sleek vessels whose very design spoke of advanced technology and peaceful intentions. But their weapons, when they opened fire, spoke of power that dwarfed even Zealoty capabilities. Zealoty Command Vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation Navy. A voice crackled across all communication frequencies. You are ordered to withdraw from Veil Theory space immediately. Federation dogs, came to snarl reply. This world is forfeit. Our claim supersedes yours. Actually, it doesn't, Admiral Chin replied conversationally. As of 37 minutes ago, the Veil Theory government requested membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance. We're here to protect our newest allies. King Vorthak turned sharply toward Marcus, his eyes wide with shock. We requested no such thing. Marcus's expression remained perfectly innocent. You didn't. But Princess Zarathek did, acting as your official representative. The message was transmitted along with my call for aid. I did no such, Zara began, then stopped as Marcus's slight smile registered. You sent a false message. I sent a message indicating that Veilthra was interested in exploring membership options and that immediate protection would be appreciated while those discussions took place. Marcus corrected gently. Technically, the message was entirely accurate. You manipulated us, Vorthak said, but his tone carried grudging admiration rather than anger. I gave you an option you didn't know existed, Marcus replied. The choice to accept or decline is entirely yours. The battle was turning rapidly now. Terran Federation ships moved with impossible precision, their weapons surgically removing Zealoty capabilities without destroying the enemy vessels outright. It was, Zara realized, exactly what Marcus had described. Strength used for protection rather than destruction, power exercised with mercy rather than vengeance. Within 20 minutes, the Zealoty fleet was in full retreat, their commander's final transmission little more than incoherent rage and promises of future retribution. The immediate threat was over, but the larger question remained. What would the Veil Theory choose to do next? Admiral Chun requests permission to come aboard, General Kithara reported. She wishes to discuss the Defense Alliance in detail. She's Marcus's sister, Zara observed, noting the family resemblance in the name and the protective way the Admiral had responded to the crisis. Older sister, Marcus confirmed. And, yes, she'll want to discuss terms. But I think you'll find that Terran Federation membership requirements are quite different from your pack laws. King Vorthak stood slowly, his massive frame carrying the weight of 10,000 years of tradition and the promise of an uncertain future. Around him, his people worked to coordinate with their unexpected allies, their voices mixing with human communications in a harmony that would have been unthinkable just days before. The pack laws are ended, he declared suddenly, his words carrying clearly through the command center. I dissolve them by royal decree, effective immediately. The silence that followed was profound. General Kithara's ears flattened against her skull in shock, while other officers exchanged glances of disbelief and wonder. Father, Zara whispered, are you certain? The pack laws nearly cost us everything, Vorthak replied, moving to stand beside his daughter. They would have seen us all enslaved or dead rather than accept the aid of friends. Laws that lead to extinction are worse than useless. They are evil. He turned toward Marcus, his golden eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and newfound respect. Marcus Chun of the Terran Federation, I formally request that your people consider Veilthra for membership in your Galactic Defense Alliance. We offer our strength in defense of all peaceful worlds. Marcus bowed slightly, his expression serious but warm. I'll be honored to transmit that request, Your Majesty. Though I should warn you, membership comes with certain requirements. Cultural exchange programs, trade agreements, cooperation with other member species. Contamination, General Kithara said softly, but her voice held wonder rather than fear. Growth, Zara corrected, stepping closer to Marcus with a smile that transformed her entire face. And after 10,000 years of stagnation, growth is exactly what we need. As the Terran Federation fleet moved into protective formation around Velthera, and as Admiral Chin's shuttle approached the royal palace, Princess Zarathek found herself standing beside a human who had somehow managed to change everything she thought she knew about strength, honor, and the future of her people. "Marcus," she said quietly, her voice meant for his ears alone. "Yes. When this is over, when the alliances are signed, and the cultural exchanges begin, would you consider staying here? As an ambassador or a teacher?" She paused, her courage faltering at the final threshold. "Or," Marcus prompted gently, "or as whatever you want to be. To me. To us." Marcus smiled then, the expression lighting up his entire face with warmth that had nothing to do with species or politics or the vast complexities of interstellar relations. "Princess, I can't think of anything I'd rather do than help you build a new world." Above them, human and Veltheri ships flew together in formations that spoke of cooperation rather than conquest, protection rather than predation. The pack laws were ended, but in their place, something far greater was beginning. An alliance built on choice rather than fear, growth rather than stagnation, love rather than law. The future stretched ahead of them, vast and uncertain and filled with possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone. But together as allies and friends, and perhaps something more, they would explore that future with courage, wisdom, and the kind of strength that came not from isolation, but from the willing choice to stand together against whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. Princess Zarathek had chosen a human mate, but in doing so, she had given her people something far more valuable than a single relationship. She had given them a future worth living for. The pack laws were dead. Long live the Alliance.